Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Kerman with Leading Edge Seminars. And thank you for being here. Thank you for being in the screen, or if you choose not to be in the screen, that's okay too. Today, our very special guest is Mary Cosimano, and I will introduce her in just a couple of moments. We're going to be talking with Mary about her interesting life and career, and then we'll be opening up for your questions. We'd like to begin with letting you know what's up for us at Leading Edge for the next while. So happy to tell you that our next free virtual lunch will be with Sue Johnson on September 9th. Many of you know she's one of the founders of emotionally focused therapy and a very, very interesting human being for all kinds of reasons. And she'll be with us September 9th. Uh, we've kind of taken a hiatus from presenting kind of paid programs over the summer, but our webinar season begins in September with a few interesting sessions, including the beginning of a series called Speaking of Sex with Suzanne Iazenza, who actually presented with Sue Johnson on sex and couples therapy. So she's going to be presenting in September, as is Bill O'Hanlon, many of you know, who's been a very longtime writer and presenter on all kinds of topics around therapy. And he's presenting with an editor from Norton Publications on how to write a book if you're interested in how to get published, if you're interested in moving in that direction in your career. Uh, we also have, and this relates to today's program somewhat, another series on psychedelic assisted therapy webinar series. Last year we had several with Ron Siegel and some interesting guests. This coming December and January, Ron will focus on, again, the topic of psychedelic assisted therapy with Bessel van der Kolk, with Richard Schwartz, and with Dr. Geeta Vyed. All that information's on our website. And then we're going to start to publicize a conference in San Diego, which we haven't put on our screen yet on our website, but Mary Cosimano will be joining us in San Diego next March with presenters including Bessel van der Kolk, Richard Schwartz, Gabor Mate, Phil Wolfson, and other people who have been very involved in psychedelic assisted work. And it's going to be an in-person and stream session next March, if you can think that far with everything going in the world today. And the only other thing we're going to be telling people more about in coming months is 4 weeks of trainings in Cancun next February. Fingers crossed with all the COVID stuff, but we're feeling confident. And there again, Bessel van der Kolk will be leading a session. So will Diana Fosha, Frank Anderson, Janina Fisher, and many other kind of favorites of ours. So that's kind of what's coming up. So here we are today with Mary Cosimano, and let me just tell you how we're going to work. First, Emily Porter is officially our hostess with the mostest. She might have waved at you if you were looking at the screen. She's there for you. And if you have any issues, go to the chat line. If you like to ask Mary a question, because about half the time will be for question and answer, just go to the chat line as well. Emily has also put in the screen that this session can be closed captioned if you would like. That information will be there. Also, everything we do, including this session, is recorded. So if you've missed something, you want to hear something again, a link will be sent to you within the next day or two, which will include any information that comes out of today that might get added, plus a copy of today's session. Okay, let's move on to today. So, Mary, it's such a pleasure to welcome you here. And I want to start off because you may be known by some people watching, but not to everybody, but you said something very interesting. You said, our true authentic nature is love. And by love, I mean connection to ourselves, to others, and to everything. For out there to get to know Mary, that's what we're going to do today. Mary's a licensed social worker who's been working with the Johns Hopkins Center for Psychedelic and Consciousness Research since 2000, when they began their research with psilocybin. In her role as Director of Guide Facilitator Services, she's responsible for the training and supervision of session facilitators. She's also served as a session facilitator for over 450 sessions, and she's led over 1,000 preparatory sessions and integration sessions for Johns Hopkins. Their studies have included people with issues around cancer, opiate addiction, early onset Alzheimer's, anorexia, depression, and other things. We'll get into that. But I'd like to start off with a kind of a trip down memory lane for who is Mary and how did she get to Johns Hopkins in her life? So, Mary, I know you had a degree from social work from West Virginia University. What led you to Johns Hopkins in the year 2000? First, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Michael, for that introduction, and thank you all for being here. So let's see. Of course, the story can go on for, go in all different directions, but to kind of encapsulate how I got at Hopkins, I grew up in Washington, D.C., lived a lot of different places. The most recent before moving to Baltimore was Seattle, and ended up moving to Baltimore for my husband's family's work and then being back on the East Coast, which I missed a lot of my family and friends. So I moved back to Baltimore over 30 years ago now, and just started my life there. I had been working for Nutri-Systems as a behavior specialist, weight loss specialist. Did a lot of work that was the beginnings of kind of opening up me to the world of not academia. More, I did a lot in Seattle and prior to that with nutrition and diet and education, nutritional education and body, mind, body, and a lot of different modalities that in the late 70s and early 80s in the Seattle and a lot of the West Coast area sounds like the new agey, which some of it was, but it was very much in alignment with who I was and becoming guided imagery and just kind of body, focus on the being in the body and then altered states being out of the body in meditation and all different areas. So when I was behavior specialist, I used a lot of those techniques with my clients. And so I continued that when I moved to Baltimore and had other jobs and had a son in '89 and was home with him for about 6 years, which was one of the joys of my life. And then I was in a meditation group with Bill Richards, who many of you may know that name. He was a pioneer. He did this work back in the 60s and 70s when Roland Griffiths, our principal investigator, was starting the psilocybin studies at Hopkins. They said, hey, we need guides, and they realized this guy, Bill Richards, used to do this work back in the 60s and 70s. He's from Baltimore. I wonder if he's interested, called him, and yes, he was like thrilled. So Bill and I were pre-pandemic still in a meditation group together. So I guess it was about 22 years ago now, 1999, after one of our meditation groups, he just asked to talk with me and told me about this research going on, because you always have to have two guides. So he was going to be the main guide and then needed an assistant, and thought that I would be good to assist him in the work. So it wasn't something I was jumped out at. I didn't know psychedelics, the therapeutic value. I loved what I was doing. And so it was something I really spent every minute of the time I had, because I had to make that decision going inward to try to see if it was the best thing for me. And obviously I ended up taking the job. It actually wasn't, I didn't have that much clarity when I took it, but I kind of knew I was supposed to. And so when I started at Hopkins in 2000, I did not know the value, at all, that it could have such therapeutic value. And now I can say 21 plus years later that I could not have written a job description that was more perfect for me in so many ways, in who I am, for my personal growth, and for feeling fulfilled with being with others in the capacity that I have been at Hopkins for this many years. Basically, being with the people, with them. I was working full time, so I was there all the time. And it was all, just this relationship with our volunteers, whether I was the guide or doing the assessments or in the beginning, it was everything, the phone calls, the screenings, meeting with them before, during, and after. So it's, as we might talk about, relationships love is our true nature. That's relationships and connections. And so it's been connections for me for these last 20 some years, very intimate because of this type of research that has been so fulfilling. And I can say without a doubt that these medicines have a therapeutic value for the right person at the right time with the proper screening and guidance, and integration. So that was a lot. So I'm going to stop now.
Okay. Well, we're going to get into the Hopkins, the research and all that stuff and what it is and what you've learned. But I think, what all therapists can learn is your belief in love as an ultimate healer, and the influence of Brene Brown's on your work about the importance of a sense of connection. This doesn't have to do with drugs. This has to do with all of us. And I'm wondering, there was kind of a marriage of your interest, Leo Buscaglia, who some of you may know from the distant past, as someone who talked about love a long time ago. So tell us a little bit, before you got to, or what you've learned at Johns Hopkins, about the importance of love and connection that all of us can benefit by, and also how you've learned that through some of your research.
Yeah, so that try to figure out how to put that in this little bit of time, because there's so many ways, again, I could go off, because this is my life, and consciously has been my life for over 40 years, really more like 45, consciously on this path of who am I? Why am I here? What's the meaning of life? And of course, my life in particular, that's who I am. That's me. I'm here. And so nothing has been more important. So, when I look at my life, and I've thought about it a lot more lately, my path is not at all, as far as, especially at the Hopkins, the normal way people are that are there now. I'm not an academic. I never wanted to be. My path has always been just what is right for me now. And if you look at the different things I've done in my lifetime, when I started consciously doing that for 25 some years, it's just so varied, all the different places I've been and ways I've lived in my life. But the core has always been this trying to have more clarity on where I'm supposed to be. And so that has been my lifelong, I don't know, path. So everything I've done is this right for me? And the way that I go about that is, whatever comes up. And as Michael said, Leo Buscaglia. So there are two teachers that stand out for me that really brought me to this place of love as our true nature, the simplicity of love as our true nature. And Leo Buscaglia, who is taught on love. And again, there's such a long story. I can't go into him, and I would love to, because he's so amazing. He was called Dr. Love. After a student of his committed suicide, he was devastated and needed to do something about it, because he did not have a clue that she was, and it just was like heartbreaking to him. So he went inward. What should I do? What should I do? And he ended up starting a class on love, just that, in Southern California. And it was a non-credit. He got the university to approve it, and a non-credit course. And he did that for years, and every class was like overfilled. And that's all it was. That was it. When I heard that, I remember so clearly, it was like, shooting something in me. I heard him talk. I listened to him over and over. It's like, oh my God, that's what I want to do. I thought, what could be more exciting? What could be more interesting? But truly, what could be more important? So I said this, knowing this over 40 years ago. The other teacher that came along that spoke the same language was Gerald Jampolsky, who is just also an amazing man. He's in his 90s now. He wrote a little book based on Course in Miracles called Love is Letting Go of Fear. It's a young adult book, but it had a lot of the principles from the Course in Miracles. But what spoke to me were some of the core lessons in this book, and they were, there's only two emotions, love and fear. Peace of mind is our only goal. Forgiveness our only function. The present moment is all there is, and love is the answer to all questions. And love is our true essence. So I read that, and it was again like this shooting in me. This is it. This is all. This is all I need to know. And yet I remember so clearly telling myself this, I know I'm not there yet to embrace the simplicity of this, who we truly are. So it has been a journey of becoming more and more and more to be in alignment with my true self, which is love, which is connection to everything, to me, to you, to nature, and even, as bizarre as it sounds, to the chair I'm sitting on, I'm gonna take a drink because I need this. It's connection with that. And one of my favorite quotes of enlightenment is by a Japanese Zen master, Dogen Zenzi. And he said, when I heard it, it was like, I just became my go-to, I guess. Enlightenment is intimacy with all things, just what I said, myself, you, everything. So the more we have a relationship, an intimate relationship with more people, places, and things, the more we're in alignment with who we truly are, which is my goal in life, or my lifelong journey. And I've done a billion things, probably, to whatever it is at the time I'm reading or practicing or involved with, using that to get closer to this place. So that, again, is a lot. I'm going to stop there.
Okay, so you know what? We're talking about love, Zen masters, Leo Buscaglia. Let's talk about Johns Hopkins. And,
Okay.
You've said you've learned that psilocybin can be a means to reconnect to our true nature. But I think you'll be interested in the research you're doing and the work you've been doing for 20 years. I know there are 3 stages: the preparatory meeting session with people, psilocybin session, and then integration session. So let's go back. Who are the people who you've been working with? Mm-hmm. What are those stages like? What goes on at Johns Hopkins that makes you feel that see the value of using psilocybin in psychotherapy?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm just going to jump back to my little story and telling you that when I joined Johns Hopkins, I had gotten to the place where I was not by all means there, but so much more in myself, knowing that this was the way, to just be, work on myself to be this true nature. So, and I'd been asking all these questions, who am I? So when I joined Hopkins, what was the beauty of it, which I really came together me after 11 years there, was the model that we use, the way that we go about running our sessions. And the basic model is the same, no matter whether it's for depression or anorexia or beginner meditator, long-term meditator. It's the same model that when someone is enrolled in the study, when they have passed all of the different requirements, they're given 2 guides. And that guide is with them throughout their time, preparation sessions, the guided psilocybin sessions, different number depending on the different study, and the preparatory meetings. I'm sorry, the integration meetings. And so all 3 are equally important, in my opinion. But the beauty of the preparation is that, and for me, it's them telling their story. That is the way, the most important thing about someone going into a psychedelic experience is this trusting who you're with. So that, of course, it's the whole study, it's everyone involved in the study at Hopkins, but of course, mostly with this relationship you have with your guides. And so you want them to have their trust in you. And that is because when you give someone a psychedelic, anything can come up. And I believe that within us, I just believe this, that we have the capacity to be Mother Teresa or Hitler, depending on our life circumstances. Different things surface or get stuck inside us. And when you're under the influence of a psychedelic, it's like it opens you up to what's inside. And that means that anything can come up. Things we know are there, things that have been hidden, and it can be harrowing. It can be embarrassing. It can be the deepest grief, shame. It can be joy and love. But you want to be able to have that come out, because if it's inside, it wants to come out. And you can only allow that to come through if you feel safe with who you're with. So the way that we do that in our preparatory meetings is by having the volunteer tell their story. And by telling their story, they're so courageous, they're vulnerable, because they're sharing these parts of themselves that we often don't want to share. And that's a really important piece of the preparatory meetings, is to tell them that it's really important. We want to hear your life. And of course, you can't tell us everything, but we're going to start where you're born and go through all the different places, the highlights, the lowlight. But I really want you to tell me what you most don't want to tell me, what's most shameful, embarrassing, sad, grief, and because of what I just told you, why. And the beauty of that is people hear it, and they do. And so they open themselves up. They're so vulnerable. And that allows for this relationship that becomes so intimate and so close, and so feeling safe. So that's the preparation. And then the other piece of the preparation, of course, is talking about logistics, what they need to eat and bring and wear and medications and all that. And I could talk about a lot of the things, the way they bring pictures, et cetera. But also how to navigate a high dose psilocybin session. And that, again, is a whole, another topic in itself. But basically, the basics of that is whatever comes up, welcome it. See it, really, to reframe that it's a good thing, no matter how much you don't think it is or don't want it to come up. If it's coming up, it's a good thing. You want it to, so go for it. We are right here with you. So during the session, we're right here with you. We're at your side the entire time, and I have been for the 6 hours, or talking to you, or stepping back if you don't want us. But whatever you want, we're here for you. You're safe. We're going to remind you. So that's the prep. And then they go into the session, and then we're there together. And the basic default position is eye shades, headphones, music, laying on the sofa. That's nice. They usually want to be tucked in and covered up, which makes you feel safe and comfort and cozy. Of course, often you'll take it off, or you're hot, or you want more. But that's basically where they are for the session day, the all-day session, going inward. It's closing off the external stimuli. We certainly get them up at different times, but looking at pictures and looking around the room. But the majority of time is them going inward, and so that's that exploration. So the study, rather than my exploration of, for me, who am I? It's this exploration of who are you? who are you? Why are you here? This is about you. This is about you. And I am here to just be here with you on this journey, to do whatever I can to help you find your own answers, because I don't have your answers. And then the integration, we always have an integration the next day. They write a session report. Some write many, many pages, 15, 18. Some write just bullet points, but it's important to capture your experience before we meet, just to talk about, just to have it in, from your mind. And then integration, and depending on how many integrations is dependent on the study. Some have a lot more than others. And the number of sessions also is dependent on what we're looking at for the study. So we've had as little as 1 session and as many as 5 in our dose effect. And our anorexia, we have 4. And we've had 3 and 2 and 1. So the integration is, they're all equally important, but the integration is the key to bringing it together. Because if you just do the prep, if you just have the experience and leave it there and go back to everything you did before, the same, it's going to be the same. And so it's about how are you going to bring this to your everyday life. And it's so easy. Integration is so important because it's so easy to dismiss these experiences for many reasons. One of the main ones is that, this seems surreal, when you're in this, of course, a day where you're just going inward and all these altered states and things that are, just some bizarre, some new insights, reframing. And then you come back and you're here. It's like, was that real? It wasn't real. And a lot of things are subtle that you can easily dismiss, and even the big things you can dismiss. So that's why it's so important to have integration and ongoing, and to make that your new way. If any of you are familiar, this default mode network, which is where we have these loops that's dampened in the psilocybin experience. So there's all kinds of new connections and neural pathways, and the synesthesia, because auditory will go to the visual cortex, so they can see sound and hear color. And again, it's just how are you going to make that a part of this life that now is so different than what you experienced. But what the key is that so many people have had experience where they know what they experienced was real, like that their true nature is love, that we are one, we all are connected. So they go back and they'll forgive when they couldn't forgive this relative or this friend. Now they see it as, how can I not, and more compassion for themselves, and more just letting go of what they thought was important. I mean, that's such a huge thing. This seriousness, and I could talk about this forever. This seriousness of how we take life and what we say is important, and the way we get so tight and caught up in more and more and more, and degrees and money and looks and all that. They see that's not what is important. What is important is my relationship with you in this world. And, I've just seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of examples, and all different ways. This mystical experience, which happens to many people, and it's viewed as this is the best way to have a transformative experience. I take a bit of issue with that, but that's another story. But basically, whatever the volunteer experiences, whether it's the joy in one and connection and light, or they had a very difficult time, they couldn't get through, or it took them a while, they didn't feel like they got it, that's exactly what their experience was supposed to be. And that's where they're at right now, and what they're supposed to be for where they're at now to go forward in their life. And so you don't do anything wrong. You can't do anything wrong. You just show up, you take it, and here we are. So I'm going to stop talking a lot.
I'm going to open it up for questions very soon because I'm sure there are a lot of questions about this whole process. But I just want to jump to the follow-up research and what you're finding. I think some of the criticism of people don't know what you're doing might be, oh, well, people go on a retreat or they go on a meditation week and they come back feeling great. And 5 days later, 7 days later, they fall back into the same old patterns. What are you finding from the research?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a great point, Michael. And, that's again, this integration piece. And often what you hear mostly is, I took it and I was cured. And then people come in and think that's what it is. But no, there are some people who just like that, everything's changed. Their depression has been gone from the day after the session, but and they still do things. They still are, rewiring these new ways. But most people need to continue to have a discipline, to have, and it's not, they have the insights and the experience that helps them to go forward, but they still have to do it. So, but what we have found, because our studies are generally 6 months or 1 year, and we have done 14-year, and we have done 2.5-year follow-ups and some, is that there is still benefit after all this time. But if you talk with the people who, that we do, that have had these, they've continued to make this a part of their life, and they've continued to incorporate it and work at it, and it's become a discipline, a new way of life. I don't know if that's answering your question, Michael.
Well, one more question for me. It was really a two-part question. Of the people you've seen, are there kinds of issues that they bring that are most resolved or least resolved with the work that you're doing? People who are depressed or trauma or anorexia. Can you comment on what it seems to work best with, if that's such a thing? And are there types of people you're seeing that it doesn't work as well?
Well, so one thing just to say about that is, in most all of our studies, the ones that we have completed and the ones that we have completed and published, so found, analyze the results, they are all very similar. The majority have benefited, and I forget the percentage, 60 some percent, will say after all this time that is still among the 5 most personally meaningful and spiritually significant experience of their lives. So, but one thing we are working with, as we're working with, the depression and the anorexia, and we're going to be working with, PTSD and these indications that have more, most likely need more, studies. How many sessions do they need? What's optimal? That's such a huge piece that, just, you have to, start somewhere with where you begin. But so we're still figuring out a lot of that. So yeah, it's hard to say very specifically, other than what we have done up to now, what we have published, it's been very similar.
Okay. Let's open up for questions because we always get such good ones. Emily, can you help us out and let us know what we have?
The first one was emailed in prior.
And people should let us know where they're from as well.
Okay. First question, what are the training requirements, or what will the training requirements be for psychotherapists who want to provide psychedelic assisted psychotherapy? I'm seeing some certification programs online, but curious what the requirements will be.
Mm-hmm. So that is an unknown question. It's a great question. It's unknown. And that's what all of the clinical trials, all the research is about. What is the optimal, way to, to go about administering these? I actually just talked with the Oregon, because they just, legalized passed a bill where in 2 years they have to put together their program of just what you're asking, whoever asked that. And so that's what they're also working on. What is the requirements? The schools, CIIS, the first one, the one that I work at, California Institute of Integral Studies has the psychedelic assisted therapy program, research therapy program. So, and then there's many more opening up now. But, you know, that just having that doesn't mean you'll automatically be a psychedelic therapist, but it's one way that will further, you know, what is your training? What is your life experience? What is your educational training? All of these things I know I believe need to be taken into account. So this is still in, you know, the process. That's what all this research is about.
Thank you. Which specific strains of psilocybin mushrooms are commonly used for studies, and are different strains being used for different client goals?
Yeah, so we have always used the same one, and we got that, you know, I don't know how many of you know, but we use a synthetic, which most of, if not all, the researchers use a synthetic at this point. And so so I know other places now are looking for different strains, some of the new startups, and they're looking at different strains of it that they can use, or different ways they can make models. But right now, again, we use the synthetic.
Great.
Psilocybin is in, I think, over 100 different mushroom species.
Okay. Our next question is from Raji. Raji, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Just in response, I like the description you gave of your room where a person would be, or a ideal room. What would be the advantages or the disadvantages of being outdoors for the experience, but with the same guidance of a qualified guide?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we would love to be able to be outside, and I know that's the future. There's, you know, already retreats in different places that are out in nature. This is what we need to do for our science, you know, studies right now. But the vision for me is that you know, what's best, you know, is it best for someone to be, you know, outside in nature all day? Is it best to be inward? Personally, I like the model where you would be inward, at least for the first few hours, and then have the advantage of being outside for the end of it. That is one thing that so often our participants have this connection with nature that they, if they had it before, it's intensified. If they haven't, they have it now. That's really common.
Thank you. Our next question, what should a client ask when seeking a provider for this therapy?
Seeking a provider, well, right now, you can only join if there's a study going that you're going to qualify for. So, so I'm not sure what they're asking, because you can't just, you know, go to a therapist and say, I want to do this. I don't know if that person wants to have a little more clarity or help me.
Yeah, let's see. Hi, Leslie.
Hey, so that was my question, Mary. And, you know, I have had different clients interested in engaging in this type of therapy, and I, you know, don't know where to refer them.
Yeah.
What you're suggesting is they have to qualify for a study.
To do it legally.
To do it
right
legally.
now, it is only legal if it's a clinical trial. And the government website where all clinical trials are posted is all one word, clinicaltrials.gov. And so, because there's thousands of clinical trials, these are all United States and some overseas too. So there's a little, you know, search box, or two actually. And so you would put in, you know, you'd put in psilocybin or psychedelics or MDMA, depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever. And then it would come up and it shows all the ones that are current, and it gives kind of a outline of that and some of the criteria and who to contact for that study. Other than that, there's so many underground therapists, but that's not an area we go into.
Great, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question is from Vicky. Vicky, do you want to unmute?
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Hi. You too, Vicki.
I have just a couple of questions on, I wonder if you could comment on the benefits or maybe the drawbacks. Microdosing has become quite a popular thing recently. Could you comment on that at all?
My only comment on that is that right now there aren't any, there's not any research that's done. I mean, there might be some, I don't even know. We're going to be starting one eventually, but now it's all anecdotal and it's all over the place. But you know, you can read many people feel benefit. I can see that it can be beneficial, but I don't know. Yeah, but yeah.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you, Vicki.
Our next question is from Tina. Tina, did you want to unmute?
Hi, Mary.
Hi.
I'm wondering if maybe you could speak a little bit more about, I'd just like a little bit more clarity on the default mode network and the interaction with psilocybin. And if you were also mentioning about using session notes for integration, I didn't know if that also had a role to activate work with the default mode network to help integrate some of that, the realizations that may have come in with the treatment.
I'm not sure what you mean, Tina, by session notes.
Oh, you had said that after the treatment, you had encouraged
Session report.
a session report. Yes, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you're asking if that has anything to do with their experience because of the default mode network?
Yeah, or maybe just understanding a little bit more of the interaction between the default mode network and psilocybin, I think might be helpful for me.
Sure. I'm not the scientist, so I can't speak. I can speak only very simply to that. And the simple answer is the default mode network, many people liken to this. This is where this ego is and who we are and you know, this framing of ourselves. And they found that it is decreased when someone is under the influence of psilocybin. So it's like all these things, it's like a filter, that, because there's so much going on all around. And if we didn't have this default mode network to have this filter, we wouldn't be able to navigate life. So when you have psilocybin or psychedelic and it dampens that, then it opens up, and probably many of you have seen the image, Robin Harris's image of the brain normal, not on psilocybin, with, you know, just say there's 100 networks, auditory, visual, and then the brain on psilocybin, and there's thousands. And so there's it allows for this, all these different experiences. And like I said, some with the synesthesia, you know, like seeing sound and hearing color, and this opportunity then to see things differently and begin and make have a new neural pathway is the very simple way that I can say it, but there's a lot more to it that others, the scientists, could speak to. That help?
Yes, and if I could ask one quick follow-up question about the session report, then does that help to integrate sort of those new neural pathways back into, sort of connect with the default mode network, so then it becomes part of that, or there's no, maybe I'm making a link that's not there, but.
Yeah, that's what, you know, we don't know for sure, but that's what it seems like.
Okay.
Yeah, these new experiences they had now, you know, there's a lot of, you know, different images, and one is the snowfall, the snow, you know, you're going sledding and they have all these paths that are deep ruts, and they've been there forever. So when we start to go down a hill, you naturally go down that. Psilocybin is like this, you know, a new snowstorm, and then so it's all fresh, these new pathways, and then let's work on making those. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Sean asks about during the medication session, what are the best strategies to ground the client if needed, and what signs would the therapist need to assist the client during the medication session?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes the therapist have a really good idea, they're not doing well, help me, I need you. And sometimes there still as can be, and that's going on, but they're not saying it. But what the preparatory sessions are about is to, really tell them the importance of tell us what you need. We don't always know. And so we're only going to know if you tell us. So this is really impressed in the prep. If you need us, if you don't want to talk, put your hand out, we'll get it. But, ask, are you cold? Do you want more blankets? You're hot, you want them off. You want a hand, you want reassurance. So that's one piece of it, is that, we have really, tried to ingrain that in them, that we're here for you, you need to tell us. But then, they often can't or won't for many reasons, if they are, so we always, and we tell them this again, in prep, I do this because we often will just say we're going to check in every half hour, hour, depending on, what's going on. But we just will, just gently ask them or touch their shoulder, anything you'd like to share. How are you doing? And it's often at those times that people who hadn't said something that it was important that they needed to for whatever reason, then they will. So that's another way. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, so I don't know if that's enough. I'm trying to think what else I might say, but if you have more questions about that, we do the best we can. We always are asking, we're always checking in, but we also tell them they need to tell us. And like I said, we are, and we have been with them physically, verbally, a lot of the time, or sometimes, but other times they're fine on their own the entire time, and they have all this going on and they don't need us for a minute, and that's fine too. So there's not any best way. They should have this, they shouldn't have this. Whatever it's good, best for them.
And if I could follow up on that, what about the grounding strategies of breathing? Is there a risk that maybe there's too much of a focus on that and not just kind of tuning into the experience?
The thing about, that's a good question. One of the other things we do is talk about mantras or words, and we talk about this in prep, that we have, or that they have, that help them if they need grounding. And breath is certainly one of them, because we know that's one of the quickest ways to bring us back, to get us back centered. So we do use that a lot, but I have not seen it, Sean, as a distraction, because, well, I just haven't. So yeah, the breath is often used as a way to, help bring them back. But there's also like TLO, trust, let go, be open, is one we talk about in prep. That's one of kind of our guidelines of how to do this. Trust yourself, trust us, trust the study design, trust the universe, let go of what you want to happen, what you think should happen, and then be open to whatever does happen. So trust, let go, be open. We might remind them of one of them or all of them, or what's their word. And, people will say, this is what I want to hear if I'm having a hard time. And so I'll make sure I write that down so I know to say that for them, because that helps them easily. Just relax, breathe. All is welcome. You're perfectly safe. Go deeper. The ones that we've talked about and the ones they've shared, if they have, those are all ways that can help bring them back. And of course, a hand can often be that, or just touching their ankle or their shoulder. The touch can be, if that's right for that person, can bring them back too. And just sometimes they need to talk. A lot of times you can talk too much. That can be something, I think, maybe like you're talking about, you can breathe, are you breathing too much? You can talk too much, and then you're kind of trying to avoid going deeper. But there are times where it's really important that you talk. So you kind of have to navigate both. Does that answer your question?
It does. Any tips to know when to push forward or when to pull back? i.e. talk more or talk less
Yeah.
with the client?
Well, that's that again. You just kind of, it's right there in the moment. You work with it. I remember one of our volunteers where she kept coming up to talk. We kept saying, go back down. You let her talk, put her back down. Let her talk, but she kept doing it. And then both Fred Barrett, one of the guide with me, one of our colleagues, we realized, you know what, we just felt she needed to talk. And so she talked a long time, but she talked, telling this piece that was going on with her. And then she laid back down, but it was a long time. And afterwards she said, I so appreciate that you let me talk. And she said, sometimes you have to tell your story to let go of your story. And so, so in that case, that was really important. We didn't know that. We kept trying at first, but then luckily she didn't listen, in the fact that, but a lot of times when somebody's talking a lot and you just say, hey, can you just be quiet? Can you just, see? And then they'll just be gone and you won't hear them for 2 hours. They didn't even realize that they were, doing that.
That's really helpful. Thank you very much, Mary.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Sean.
So the next question is from Janice in Toronto, who was wondering about the impacts for those who already have some form of synesthesis in daily life, or so alternatively, those who have visual or auditory processing disorders. One or more are relatively common for those on the spectrum with ADHD and access to BPD, in particular with PTSD. And they're just wondering about how there might be impacts, or if there's been any research on that.
Yeah, we don't know. I don't know. We don't know that, so I really can't speak to that, but that's a really good question. And that is being explored in other places now.
If you actually look at the clusters of people in certain diagnostic categories, synesthesia is often missed diagnostically, because if someone is talking about hearing noises or voices that others don't, it's assumed to be auditory hallucinations, when often it isn't, or seeing colors in a way that other people don't can be mislabeled as visual hallucinations. The really interesting one, there's a wonderful study out of McLean Hospital in their borderline personality disorder program, looking at the presence of auditory processing disorders as the trigger for BPD in a group of people who don't have an otherwise, so I've got an airplane flying over me, an otherwise identifiable trigger for their BPD, and BPD and trauma, PTSD and eating disorders are often very labeled together. I think it's Dr. Blaise Aguirre, Ageirre. If anybody's interested in following up with that, he had led that particular study, and it was a very fascinating one. He was involved with one of my clients at the time, but it was really interesting. Anyway, I was just interested because that, to me, having a relatively normative set of processing skills would be a control, if you would, otherwise in using psychedelics, because if you're dealing with anybody at either end, either the disorders or synesthesia that's pre-existing, it's going to be a different series of impacts. Anyway, thank you. I just wondered if anybody had that thought, but follow up.
Thank you. We only have time for a couple more questions. So from Andrea, she asks that you mentioned ongoing integration into their lives long after the psychedelic experience. What does that look like, and what types of things do they find helpful for continued growth?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's again such an important question, and because, as I said, if you just have the experience and don't do anything with it, you're just going to go back to who you were, you're who you were then. And so there's so many different ways. And so we talk about lots of ways that, you might think about, but of course we ask them what's their way, and that it really, it really has to become part of your life, whatever. There's many ways, and you can do one, like, okay, here's a quick example. We had a volunteer. So there's art. You can do, some people make art from a piece of a study that they experience that they had. I had one volunteer who in his fun, he liked to sculpt. So he got a big chunk of clay and put it on a table. he would just sit down at certain times and think about his experience and mold whatever came up to him. We got other people who have drawn pictures. Some we've been given some that have come from their experience, but it's nice to have touchstones. So art, people have written poems about it. Journaling is a great way. Are you a writer? Then journaling is a great way, or writing, poetry or a story or whatever. Meditation, of course, is another way. There's lots of different types of meditation. So we talk about if that is that something that they're, think they want or interested in. So many different types of meditation. So we explore that. It's about getting into your body. You can't make, or I believe, you can't make change until you're in your body. So people who are more experiencing, for whatever reason, you have to get in. You have to get into your body to begin, taking action. So it's working with a person. So oftentimes we'll do exercises, just meditations or body, scans, or just this grounding. Put your feet on the ground. Feel the earth. Going out, so that's another way. Just really honoring that. Going out in nature, whatever that means for you. That's one of the most, I think, probably the way that most people, amongst other things, because I have more than one thing, but going out in nature is one of the best ways to begin to integrate these experiences. I heard that we're not linear beings, we're multi, and that nature is multi, and when we're with nature, those two components, the internet, or ABC, one is two. So many things that people are doing nowadays are in this linear, and are not in spaces that give us this more openness and multiple ways of seeing, like on the psychedelics, and nature is one of those ways. So nature is a great integrator. So anyway, if we just go on and on about, yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time for one last question, and it's from Leslie. Leslie, did you want to unmute and let us know where you're from?
Sure, I'm in Frederick, Maryland. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
I just want to thank you again for this very quick hour.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate it. And so I was wondering, you said something about, we never know what's going to come up. And I experienced that when I use EMDR. And I'm wondering, are there similarities and differences with psychedelic assisted therapy and EMDR that you're aware of?
Well, I've had, this was like when it first started, I think 25, I don't know when it was, 30 years ago. I did just a couple sessions of EMDR because I wanted to experience it, but I didn't really have specifics, so I only did a couple. And so I don't know EMDR to speak to that aspect of it. But yeah, so I think what you're saying, but I can't speak to that,
if I can,
with any authority.
Okay, if I can ask something else, if I can be so bold, have you experienced yourself the psychedelic assisted therapy?
Yeah, and of course that's a question that is always asked, and understandably so. What we it's not a legal substance, and so I say that there are many ways to have altered states, meditation, breath work, other ways. Yes. And we say all the guides have had experience with altered states.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Do we have time for one last question?
Yeah.
I know Matthew Kelly was hoping to get his question asked. Matthew, are you there?
Hi, actually, I just typed it to Mary, so maybe Mary, you can read it there. I'll just
I'm not looking
read what
at that. Yeah.
Okay, so I wrote, there seems to be a hunger for transcendence in the culture, a kind of longing to escape life's messiness. My experience is that psychedelic assisted therapy can maybe accidentally sell this transcendence when the psychospiritual need seems to be of emotional catharsis and a more horizontal versus vertical relation with life. Some of your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I have to say, I'm not exactly sure I understand what you're saying. So this is what I heard, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah, well, I might be way off, but
well,
go ahead.
Let me jump in just to say,
Sure.
I mean, there's companies, for example, called Numinous and this kind of thing, where there's a kind of a promise of some kind of vertical transcendence. And I look at climate change and all that. We all want to fucking escape life, but I love when you talk about, the Roshi's insight about connection to all life, and so I just think that there's sometimes can be a prioritizing of a kind of a transcendence that can be a further dissociation from embodiment and life in the psychedelic movement in a way. And I just wanted to know if you've encountered a bit of that tendency.
So I apologize. I'm not really clear what you're asking. Can it take us to this place that isn't healthy because it's not really grounded?
Yeah. Whether it's I mean, maybe it's too dense of a question to ask, but maybe this isn't the arena to ask it then.
Yeah. So just
okay.
this may not be answering it, but so in fact, well, there's a paradox. So paradoxicality is one of the components, characteristics of mystical experience, which many people, do have. All are parts of the different ones. So So what I think I'm hearing you say is that it's a paradox. Yes, people do go to this transcendent place, but they're also fully here, grounded in the earth, and so it's a way of being able to bring the mystical into the practical. That's actually a definition I heard now. I mean, I've heard, and to me fits this. Integration is bringing the mystical to the practical. So people have these experiences that I think you're talking about, and that's what it's about, Matthew. How do we bring those to our everyday life to heal ourselves, each other, and the planet? Is that?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's helpful. And not perpetuating a duality, that there's a kind of a heaven that we can touch on when we're in psychedelics. It's about that this is a fully alive planet that is so inspirited, and that psychedelics can help us get more connected to our embodiment. But that's just, so I think we are kind of speaking similarly maybe about the paradox.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if we can stay on one more minute, but I have what I think is like a great example of that. Do we have another minute?
One more minute for you, Mary,
okay.
Sure.
Okay, so this volunteer, she was in our long-term meditator study, and she was laying there. We didn't know any of this until she told us after, but you could see that she was so in joy, that she was just like beaming, and you could feel her energy going up. And she was told, and this is what her experience after, she told us, she was going closer and closer and closer, getting higher and higher to heaven as she was expecting. And she was saying, I know any minute I'm going to see the face of God. So she's getting closer and getting closer. And what does she see? A nickel. And she says, God, you're a nickel? And God says, a nickel's as good as anything. And then she says, but a buffalo nickel? And God says, if you want it to be. So what does that say? This image we have of God is right here in everything. Does that kind of say, maybe? Isn't that awesome? I love that so much.
That's a great story to end on. We could have this conversation all day long.
Yeah.
Because Mary, you've been such a pioneer, and there's a lot of interest in this, both in terms of what all therapists and all of us can learn from the research you're doing and MAPS is doing and other people are doing, and then the future of the potential of this in treatment. So, Mary, we always close this way. First, I want to thank everyone for joining us and for asking questions and being there. We open up all the microphones so everyone can say thank you to you, Mary. And I want to thank you all for joining us. So thanks again. Have a great day.
Thank
and
you,
can say
Mary.
thanks to Mary.
Thank you very